Hello class, this is Mr. Biddle and welcome to another Digital Input. Today we're going to be talking about the rise of democracy. Now previously you learned how the steep mountains of Greece led people to settle in isolated communities. Because settlements were separated from each other, they developed in different ways. One important difference was how they governed themselves. Now today you are going to learn about how these ancient Greek city-states really tried different forms of government. We're going to start by talking about monarchies, then oligarchies, then tyrannies, and finally, we're going to end by talking about democracy and how it really came to be. Now, from about 2000 to 800 BCE, most Greek city-states were ruled by a monarch, or a king. Now, in a monarchy, the ruling power is in the hands of one person, usually the king. Greek settlements did not usually have queens. Now, at first, Greek kings were chosen by the people of a city-state. When the king died, another leader was selected to take his place. Eventually, though, kings demanded that their power go to their children after their death, usually their eldest son. Now, the kings of ancient Greece had many powers. They made laws and acted as judges, they conducted religious ceremonies, they even led the army during wars. They used armed soldiers to punish people who disobeyed the laws or didn't pay their taxes. The kings also had councils of aristocrats to advise them. The word aristocrat is formed from a Greek word that means best. To the Greeks, the, quote, best people were wealthy men who had inherited large pieces of land. Now at first, councils of aristocrats had no real power, but kings depended upon aristocrats for help during wars, since only the wealthy could afford horses and armor. These aristocrats soon realized that, as a group, they were stronger than the king. They wanted to share in the king's power. In some city-states, aristocrats insisted that the king should be elected instead of inheriting their crown. Then they said the king could rule only for a certain number of years. Eventually, aristocrats in most city-states overthrew the monarchy and took the power for themselves. By 800 BCE, kings no longer ruled most Greek city-states. So by 800 BCE, most Greek city-states were ruled by a small group of wealthy men. These men were called oligarchs, from a Greek word that means few. Now in an oligarchy, the ruling power is in the hands of a few people. Most Greek oligarchs were aristocrats, men who had inherited land from their families. A few were wealthy merchants. Now compared to the poor, oligarchs had very comfortable lives. They spent their days hunting and taking part in chariot races. In the evenings, they lay on couches and drank wine. They had parties where slaves and hired professionals entertained guests with music, dance, and acrobatics. Meanwhile, the poor had to work all day in the fields. The hard-working poor saw the difference between their lives and the easy lives of the wealthy, and they thought it was very unfair. To make matters worse, the oligarchs ignored the needs of most of the people. They passed laws that the poor did not like, and they used the army to force people to obey them. Many of their laws protected and increased their own wealth. In some city-states, oligarchs passed laws forcing farmers to sell themselves into slavery if they could not pay their debts. Under the oligarchs, the rich became richer and the poor became poorer. Many people who weren't wealthy came to hate oligarchs. Eventually, the poor turned to leaders who promised to improve their lives. These leaders were usually in the army. Backed by the people, they used their soldiers to throw the oligarchs out of power. So during the mid-600s BCE, people in many Greek city-states turned to men who promised to change the government. The men who forced the oligarchs from power were usually called tyrants. Now, in a tyranny, the ruling power is in the hands of one person who is not a lawful king. A tyranny is different from a monarchy in two ways. First, a tyrant cannot claim that he has a legal right to rule, and second, a tyrant's son does not usually inherit his father's power. Tyrants usually took and kept control by force, but that doesn't mean they were always unpopular. Most Greek tyrants were military leaders who gained the support of the people by promising them more rights. And once they were in control, many Greek tyrants ruled well. They made changes that helped the poor. Some canceled the debts of poor farmers. Other tyrants, though, did not use their power to help the people. Hippias, the last tyrant in the city-state of Athens, is one example. Along with his brother Hipparchus, Hippias ruled well at first. Then, two enemies of the brothers murdered Hipparchus, pictured here. After that, Hippias ruled more harshly. He paid spies to report anyone who criticized him. As his rule became more and more unbearable, he was finally forced to leave power. Soon, Athens would try another form of government, one that shared power among all citizens. So around 500 BCE, the people of Athens decided to try governing themselves. They developed democracy, or rule by the people. In a democracy, all citizens share in the ruling power. Ancient Greek democracy was different from democracy today. The government of Athens was a direct democracy. In this type of government, every citizen can vote on every issue. Typically, citizens would vote using clay shards called ostrakon, pictured here. Now, unlike Athens, the United States is a representative democracy. In this type of government, people vote for representatives who decide issues in their name and really represent us. So how did direct democracy work in ancient Athens? Well, the city had an assembly or lawmaking group. Any free man could speak in the assembly and vote on a new law or a proposal to go to war. Free men also ran the city's day-to-day business. Now, not all Greeks believed that democracy was a good type of government. Powerful speakers sometimes persuaded ordinary citizens to vote unwisely. Often, the assembly reversed important decisions after just a few weeks. Because of problems like these, most city-states returned to earlier forms of government, such as dictatorships and oligarchies. But the idea that people should rule themselves would survive and endure. In time, the ideal of democracy would become one of the great gifts of ancient Greece to the modern world and our government today. So there you have it, class. We talked about the early monarchs of ancient Greece, the kings and the queens. We then talked about how it would lead to the rise of the aristocrats and how they would eventually form an oligarchy, and these oligarchies would rule, but unfortunately it created a separation of wealth and an economic divide between the rich and the poor, which led to the rise of tyrants. Now, some tyrants were quite popular. They were benevolent leaders. However, others were not, which would cause the people to once again rebel, which led to the birth of democracy, which means power to the people. And this democracy may not have lasted forever in ancient Greece. However, the ideals of democracy will be the foundation of our government today. So there you have it, class. This is Mr. Biddle. Thanks for watching, and until next time.